Hi everyone, it's Ryan Metzler here again, and today we're going to take a look at a game from one of my favorite publishers. They made Madeira, they made Vinhos, they've made a bunch of games that I like, and this one is called Asgard. Asgard is a game by Pierluca Zizzi. Now, I hopefully got that name right, probably didn't, but anyhow, the game obviously themes around Norse mythology and the support of gods from that Norse mythology in the fight of Ragnarok at the World Tree. You're going to be using your influence to support these gods, to get request support from those gods, build them temples, help them in combat in order to score victory points. So real quick, why don't we take a look at what you get inside of the box. We'll see how the game plays, and we'll come back here at the end and I'll give you my opinions on Asgard. So here you can see the components for Asgard all set out for a 2-player game. There are minor changes for a 3- and 4-player game, but for the most part there won't be affecting what we're looking at here. If you do decide to get it, just note that it plays 3 and 4 very similarly. Now what we're looking at here is a representation of all of the gods of light and dark in the Norse mythology. So we have Freya and Balder and Odin and Tyr and Thor and Loki and Hel and a bunch of other gods, all represented on this board as areas that you can influence them or help or ask them for support or build temples to them, whatever you want to do. At the top here we have Asgard, and in Asgard we'll see that we have an area for Valhalla where all of the dead warriors go. We have an area where you can go and seek request, either looking for more warriors or recruits to work for you, or pick up more influence discs that will allow you to do more throughout the game. In the middle here, we're looking at Yggdrasil, the World Tree, and there will be battles raging at the World Tree in each of these various different locations. Currently, they're happening between light and dark populations, but it could be that the support of a god comes out and changes the sway of this battle. At the bottom, you're looking at areas where you can build temples to the gods, and these will give you points every round when you build these temples, so building them is a pretty good idea. Each player starts the game with 3 influence tokens, which will allow them to select 3 cards from their deck of gods in order to influence each round. You can get more or lose some of these discs, allowing you to select more or fewer of these gods in future turns. Obviously, this will depend on what you're trying to do. Each player will also start with a turn order token. And anybody who's not the first player will start with at least 1 warrior. This could be a white or orange warrior, or theoretically could be a giant, which they could have selected. So, depending on what you do, you'll have different things at the start of the game. To begin the game, each player is going to be selecting cards at the beginning of each round from their deck in order to influence these gods. So you'll see we have a card representing each of the gods that we spoke about. And we also have 3 cards representing gods which are not yet available. These 3 dark gods over here, which will become available in future rounds 2, 3, and 4, so more gods will get added to the game in order to be able to be influenced. Now, at the beginning of each round, you're going to go through this deck and choose 3 gods that you want to influence. 3 because you have 3 tokens. If you had 4 tokens, you would choose 4. If you had 2 tokens, you would choose 2. Anyhow, each player is going to choose 3. Once they've chosen their 3 tokens, they're going to use them to influence these gods or to place tokens out into Asgard. When you place tokens out, you're going to place them in one of various different areas, depending on which god you've chosen, or whether you decide to place that token on Asgard. So let's go ahead and take a look at the places that are available on each of the gods. So when you reveal a god card, in turn order, you're going to reveal them one at a time after you've selected them. You're going to, for example, reveal Freya. So let's go ahead and take a look at Freya's spots here. She has 2 request spots, which are these 2 silver spots at the top, and 1 temple spot that you can place on. When you place on them, you don't do anything immediately when placing. You simply place a disc there, and you would then take that disc off after all of the discs have been placed. So we would take turns alternating between players, revealing cards and placing discs until they were all placed. We would then take turns removing a disc and taking the appropriate action. So I can place on either of these 2 spots or onto the temple spot at the bottom. What these spots do is that they're going to give me some stones. When I do remove the disc from the spot, I'm going to get to take, sorry about that, 2 of these stones because I'm on this little spot showing the stone. So I would get 2 of the purple stones, which I can use at a later point. In addition, since I'm on the top spot, it says I can take 2 of the warriors from Valhalla, if there are any, and add them to my own personal supply. So if I was this player, I'd be able to take them and put them in my own personal supply. The spot below that, if you were the second player to place in the support areas or the request support areas, you would place it in the bottom one, and that would only give you the stones. So you'd only get the 2 stones. Placing in a god's temple area is going to be slightly different. This is going to allow you to build a temple to support that god. These temples down here all depict different stones on them. For example, this is 2 red stones, a blue and a green, 2 green and a red. Any stone, a yellow, a blue, and a white stone. You must have those stones in order to turn in, when you've placed on this spot, in order to build a temple to that god. When you do so, you're going to return the stones, take the appropriate temple from the top of the pile, and shift this disc over to the support area, the highest support area on that spot. You'll note that these support areas show warriors on them. For example, each of these are white. When I move this disc over, if I have any white warriors in my area, I must take all of them and place them onto the god. She requires the support of those warriors, and you will lose all of the white warriors you have from that spot. So, you will be placing them out to help support that god in their combat later, and this disc will stay here permanently. You will not get it returned to your supply. Placing them on these spots will bring them back, while placing them on here will lose them for you permanently, but will allow you to support that god in their fights later in the game during Ragnarok. Each of the gods has similar spots, so you'll see that this one here will allow you to take 2 of the yellow stones, and will also allow you to trade one of your current stones in for another different stone. The one for Odin here is going to allow you to change the turn order and also take 1 of these white stones. While the one for Tyr here will allow you to take 2 red stones and automatically win a battle with this token when battle time comes around. Loki will allow you to take 2 blue stones and take 2 actions concurrently, either placing or removing discs from the board, while other gods will have various different effects. The evil gods have their own effects. So for example, you can get green or black stones over here, but the special ability of Loki will allow you to pull off a warrior from any other god, well, including Loki, or a giant. And the ability of Hel will allow you to score a number of points equal to the number of warriors and units on any god, and then kill off a unit and bring it into Valhalla. These ones down here will allow you to replace your stone at a later point when you remove it, and this one down here will allow you to negate one of these tiles out here, which we have not yet talked about. So you're going to move from the temple area over to the support area, and then finally you're going to place the god out that's on the top of that pile into one of the combat areas over in Yggdrasil. So the light gods must always go on the left-hand side of a combat, while the dark gods must always go on the right-hand side of a combat. So left for light and right for dark. They will replace the population tile that is currently in that combat area. So for example, if I were to place this here, I would replace this tile, and I would be able to take one of these arcane symbol things over here for the end fight at the end of the game. They're basically magic that you can use at the end of the game to support one of your gods in Yggdrasil. The other tokens out here are going to let you get a wild stone, or take one of these light or dark symbols, get a weapon, change in a stone for something else, automatically win some combats, or flip over one of these tokens in Asgard. So that is how you take a temple action. Now, when you're the first person to pull off, as I said, we'll place all of our influence discs and then we'll pull them off one by one. If you're the first person to pull a disc off of one of these gods, you're going to take this little light or dark symbol, and these can be used in the Asgard action in order to get some more benefits. So instead of placing a token out onto the god that you reveal, you can instead place it out into Asgard. When you remove a disc from Asgard, you get to do several things. First is that you get to flip one of these tiles over. Now, in a 2-player game, there's only 1. In a 3-player game, there's 2. And in a 4-player game, there's 3 flipped face up. But you get to take the one tile and flip it over and take the benefit. This one will allow you to take any one recruit that you want and add it to your supply, while the other ones will give you 2 plus 1, so any 2 same and 1 different, or 1 plus 1, which is 2 different recruits. In addition to this, you can do several other things. In addition to just flipping over a tile, or if there's not a tile left, as an action, you can do several things using these little light and dark tokens that you may have collected from taking actions from various other areas on the board. So you're going to use these light and dark seals in order to either take more guys, and you can spend a light seal for a white warrior, a dark seal for a orange warrior, or a light and a dark for a giant, and we'll talk about what these are good for later. Or you can spend these seals in order to take more influence discs. These influence discs can be added to your supply in order to be able to choose more gods, or they can be used to go down here and bet, or essentially support, one side of the war, supporting the light side over here, or the dark side over here, or in the middle you can choose to support light or dark in the combat. When you buy these discs, it's going to cost you one of the symbols that's below. So for right now, if I remove my disc from here as an action, I can spend either a light or a dark symbol to buy another disc. When I do so, I can place it back in my supply, or I have the option of placing it out here on one of these combats. Perhaps I really like this Freya combat out here, and I decide to place it here to support that combat. This may or may not be a good idea, but we'll see shortly. So I could buy this and place it out here, or I could buy it and keep it to be able to select more cards. I can also buy more than one if I would like. Instead of just buying one, like this, spending one light or dark, I can buy another one. So if I wanted to, I can now buy this second one. However, it's going to cost me a light token, and then it's going to cost me an extra token for each non-empty space to the left of this token. So for example, it would now cost me a light and then another light or a dark. If this were the situation, it would cost me a dark, a light or a dark, and another light or a dark. But if this player had bought this one, now it's just going to be a dark and a light or a dark. So you'll see the further you get ahead in terms of buying these, the more it's going to cost you in terms of these seals in order to buy more discs. Once you're done with all of the actions, removing the discs from the board and taking whatever actions you wanted to, you would go down and check and see if there were any discs out supporting any of these combats. And if there were discs out here supporting these combats, you have to resolve those combats. Before you do any of this, you actually check and see if anyone has built any of these temples. And if they have, they're going to score the number of points on all of the temples that they've built. They would, of course, have them out in front of them. So I would score 7 points if I had built this temple, and mark that appropriately on the victory point track up here. After that, you're going to resolve all of these combats that actually happen in number order of all of the different worlds. They're printed very tiny, you can't really see them very well, but we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But 1 and 4 are not in the two-player game, so we're going to go 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. Now, only one of these has a disc, so we're only going to resolve this one right out here. And each of the sides here ends up with a weapon. And this is not looking good for our god, who the player has bet on. So we have a population versus a god in this case. And in this case, when the population fights the god, the population actually doesn't get to count its value because the god is overwhelming. However, they do have a magical weapon that they get to count. In this case, the value is 3. The god has a value of 1, plus a value of 0, unfortunately, which comes out to 1. So it's 3 versus 1 in this case, and our god loses the combat. In this case, this disc is going to move to the center of the board. The bet was no good because they bet on the light side, which they must do on the left-hand side of the tree. But later, when they take an Asgard action, they can actually redistribute this disc out to another combat, but won't get any benefit from doing so. In originally placing here, they would have gotten a weapon that they can use at the end of the game to add value to one of their supported gods when they fight. So it's going to go there. If this had gone differently, let's say, for example, that we had revealed a 0 here, and our god had revealed a much higher number, something more like, well, doesn't really matter, let's say 1. Now the god has a value of 2, while the population has a value of 0. 0 plus 0 is 0. This would now put this over into this area. The player would have a disc in the victory area. They supported the right side. And at the end of each round, they're going to score points based on how many discs they have in victory areas. So, for example, they have 1 disc in victory areas. They're going to get 3 points. So that's another way to win points throughout the game, aside from building temples and getting points each round for those, is going to be to support the right side of a combat, win, and get your discs placed out here in order to get victory points. And if you manage to get up to 5 discs in victory areas, you can get 20 victory points on a turn. So that's basically one whole round, is essentially you're going to choose your cards, play your cards in order to place discs, remove the discs from the board in order to take actions, buy more discs if you've placed an Asgard instead of placing on a god, use those discs to support various combats, and of course if you don't get these discs, or you'll never get these discs back, so you won't be able to use them to select more cards. Once you're done with all of that, you're going to start another round, and in the subsequent rounds, a new god would open up. You would replenish all of the light and dark tokens that have been taken by people taking the actions out here. You would make sure each god has a face-up tile, and then you would start another round by selecting cards. And of course, this time, if we have a disc over here, the yellow player is only going to select 2 cards, while the red player would select 3. Now this will go on until all of the rounds have passed, and at the end of the last round there's actually a final combat called Ragnarok. And how this works is that any discs that are out in the center, meaning that they were not winning and haven't been replaced, will go away. Any population versus population combats will vanish, and you'll only have the combats where there's a god versus a population or a god versus a god. Now you'll see throughout the game players will have supported these gods, and by supporting them they'll have placed combat units, or warriors and giants, out on those gods in order to give them more combat to fight with. When you do this, you're going to look and see who's supported what gods, and you're going to move those tokens out onto the gods to show that they're supporting them. In doing so, you're then going to resolve a final combat. You would shuffle up all of these weapon tiles and reveal a weapon for each side of each combat. Again, 1 through 7, resolving them all to see who or what side, light or dark, wins each combat. So if we were to look, let's just go again to this combat, for example. We have a population versus a god. We would reveal and show that this population has now a value of 2 plus 1 is 3, while our god has a value of 1 plus 3 is 4. In addition, they have all of the combat resources from over here. So now we have an additional plus 1 because these are worth 1, whereas if he had any giants, giants are worth 2. And oranges are also worth 1. And then you can take turns, each player placing out the tiles they've earned throughout the games. These could be weapons or these kind of mysterious magic tiles in order to modify either the combat values of any side, you can place them under gods, or to modify the rewards of winning the combat there. Once you're done placing all of these tiles, you can also recruit these gods from Valhalla, or these warriors, dead warriors from Valhalla, if you're supporting light gods, to come out and help you support one of your gods. And then you're going to calculate up the final total of the strength of each side. The strength of a side for population will be the population plus the weapon that's there, and the side for the gods will be the god plus any of their supporting warriors, plus any tiles that were placed underneath them. And you'll look and see which side won. Now, depending on how many supporters an area has, you'll score points based on that. So if your god won, you'll go ahead and score, if you're the only person supporting that god, both values here. So 12 plus 10 is 22 points. And if, for example, this magic had been played underneath, another 10 points. If there are 2 gods there, you're going to score first and second place. Whoever happened to support that god first will get first, and whoever supported it second will get second. And if your god didn't win, unfortunately, you'll get nothing. Throughout all of that, including the points you scored during the game, the points you score from all of your temples, the points you score from any combat victories that you have throughout the game, and of course the points you score from Ragnarok, whoever has the most will be the winner. Well, there you have it. That is Asgard from What's Your Game? This is another in a line of semi-medium to heavyweight games in worker placement type territory from What's Your Game? This is an area that they do very well. This one using those cards instead of dice, which they've been known to do, or various other ways of driving worker placement. But this one uses that deck of cards and those, of course, influence discs that you can accumulate throughout the game. And has a lot that you must pay attention to. Yes, you must get the stones and use the temple spots to build temples and get points every turn. You can get 7, 14, 21, 10, whoever knows how many points per turn just by building temples. But that's not nearly enough. You also need to pay attention to supporting those gods and doing the combat aspect, so you have to get more influence discs. And you're going to be tempted to get more influence discs by going to Asgard, taking the discs and allowing you to play more cards. But you also have to remember that if you don't take the disc and you place it out to a combat, you can get yourself into a victory spot, which will generate points for you every turn. Could be 3, 5, 7, could be 20. And if you get those 20 points, that is a huge point, and you just cannot ignore that. On top of that, you need to pay attention to which gods you're supporting. Not just where you're betting on your combats, but which gods you've built temples for and are supporting, and how you can get them to win at the end combat of Ragnarok, because there is a ton of points to be had there. If you're that god's only supporter and they win, you could get 30 points just from one combat. So there's a lot of points to be had, a lot of different ways to get them, and of course, point salad is one of my favorite things ever, so I'm gonna love it, right? Well, that's true and not true. I do like the game. I like it quite a bit, but it's not one that I see coming out a lot because it's hard to explain. There's a lot of things that you're looking at. I enjoy it. I think it's going to stay in my collection, but I'm not sure how often I'm going to be able to get it to the table because it's a little bit strange in terms of its execution. You're focusing on getting discs, but are you getting them to place them? Or are you getting them to fight with them? Are you placing on a god because you actually want to support that god in combat, or because you want to block somebody else from doing so, or because you just think it's a good idea and allows you to build a temple? Or do you just like their action? There's so many things to think about. So perhaps as I think about it more, or I find a better way to teach it, it'll come out to the table more often. But until that point, I just don't see a lot of people interested in it, despite its awesome theme and some really cool mechanisms. So if it sounds to you, sounds good to you, I definitely suggest checking it out, as it is a very good game. And I hope that there will be a lot of people that enjoy it. Check that one out. It's Asgard from What's Your Game?
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.